it was hard to make it really look great when it came off. And so I think if I remember correctly, we like grabbed some like images of steak and pasta and things like that from the internet, and then like comped that onto the bottom of the appendage. So like as it came off, you kind of felt like this gross texture come off of her, if that makes sense.
Just to get started, I would love to know what kind of creative, opportunities you were looking forward to when you first realized you were going to be working on Appendage.
Totally. So I also worked on the short film, which was really cool. And my wife is the writer director, Anna, and so I kind of was very ready for it, like jumping in, I would say. When Anna presented me the feature script, I was like, I mean, she wrote it very, very quickly, and like about a month was the first draft, and so I was like, oh my god, I couldn't believe how amazing it was, and how well written it was, and just how relatable it was. As someone who does have a lot of anxiety and has imposter syndrome, it was definitely just, it hit a core. And so I was excited to kind of work on a movie that I really could dig into, like personally myself, like I could really relate to myself.
Well, I know that you've worked on projects in the horror genre before. So was this kind of in line with some things you've done in the past, or was it a little bit out of your element?
This was definitely out of my element in a way. I mean, this is like the kind of movie that I grew up watching, or like to me, like Being John Malkovich is like one of my favorite movies. And so, when I read the script, it kind of reminded me of that. And I talked to Anna, and she had like Black Swan and all these really great references. And so for me, it was like, I've never been able to really work on a movie that encapsulates like horror and thrills, but also comedy, and is just such a specific tone that I had never been lucky enough to work on. So it was like I felt very lucky.
I got the opportunity to speak to Anna, who was so lovely. And I would love to hear a little bit about the collaboration process between you guys, especially because I mean she's your wife.
For sure.
And how you guys kind of work together in these different roles to make the film.
It's awesome. I think we really work well together as a couple, and also as just collaborators. That's kind of how we originally met. She had hired me to do visual effects on a short film that she was directing, and we've just been working together ever since. And yeah, this was a lot of, I just wanted to be there to support her as a producer, because I was also a producer on the film. And so as a producer, I was just wanted to be there to support her as much as possible. And I think that kind of, blends into our relationship in a way where, I just want to be the loving husband who's there after a hard day, but also kind of, help where I can to also, make sure that she gets the location that she wants, or the actors, or things like that. And then as an editor, it's just, we work really well together. We have really similar taste. I really trust her as a director. And she really trusts me too. And so we're able to, just trust each other on a lot of things. And I really look up to her. And so that collaboration has been great. Like she's able to, watch a scene and diagnose what the problem is with it in like 2 seconds. And I just learned so much from working with her. And so I feel very grateful that she's also my wife and we get to do this together.
Well, what were the main tools that you used to work on the project? Because I heard that you used a few different programs.
So the main thing would be Adobe, you can't edit with After Effects, Adobe Premiere. And within that, it was Premiere Productions. And so that was really exciting because we got to, my assistant was in LA, I was in North Carolina, and we were on the same project at the exact same time. He was syncing dailies while I was cutting certain reels, and he was, setting up reels, and I was on a different reel. And it was just so cool to be able to be working on the project at the exact same time. And then we used LucidLink as a server, which is like super cheap. Anyone can, I think it's like $20 a month, just write it off as a business expense, and it's super easy to use. And it was super fast. And it's just crazy. It's like being in the room with someone without being in the room with someone. It's as close to that as you can really get. And so that was awesome. And then we used Adobe After Effects to do probably about 70 or 80% of the VFX in the film as well. I was also the visual effects supervisor, and so I did a lot of the VFX within that. And so it's, I love Premiere because you can just really quickly pop things into After Effects, do some temp VFX, and then the director and the producers get to watch a rough cut that has some VFX in it, and everybody's happy because you can kind of get a vibe of what the scene's going to look like and what the final VFX are going to look like.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you were also the VFX supervisor, because I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask, if you worked closely with that team, or maybe the ADR team, or what the collaboration process was like there.
I was the supervisor, but we also brought in some additional VFX artists to come in and some companies to come in post, and so we worked really closely with them, and most of them used After Effects. Some of them I think one of them used Flame. But I don't know. I just love being integrated into that whole process. And even as the editor, I was definitely a little involved in ADR in terms of suggestions of like lines that could be changed and things like that. And we had a good amount of ADR on this movie. A lot of it was also just like re-recording stuff that was it was the same dialogue. It just, the quality was a lot higher in the ADR, because there was like, an air conditioning blowing or something like that we had to kind of redo the audio for.
Well, to kind of get into the movie, the instance when the appendage detaches from Hannah is kind of like a turning point in the film. It's gruesome, sure. It's unsettling, it's everything I'm personally looking for in a horror movie. So I would love to know, what did you feel you really needed to add to that scene in the post-production process?
I think it was just like, editing that scene from Hannah's perspective, so you feel her pain, as it's like detaching from her body, and making sure that you feel just exactly how painful that process is. So whether it's, when are we cutting back to her? When are we cutting to her stomach as the skin is like stretching? Things like that. We definitely tried to amp up. And then I think we added a shot in post where initially like the puppet comes off of her body. And when we actually shot it, I think that, just the timing of it all, it was hard to make it really look great when it came off. And so I think if I remember correctly, we like grabbed some like images of steak and pasta and things like that from the internet, and then like comped that onto the bottom of the appendage. So like as it came off, you kind of felt like this gross texture come off of her, if that makes sense. So yeah, just doing all that to amp it up. And then I think we added a line from the appendage that's she says, that feels good. Just to kind of give it like that, like kind of Beetlejuicy tone in that moment.
Well, something I really loved about this film too is that the appendage isn't your like typical, movie horror villain. Oh, so what did you really want to highlight about this creature, and how did you kind of achieve that in the editing process?
I think it was just about making it feel relatable in like an odd way, or like we all have that voice inside of our heads that tells us that we can't do things, or that we said something stupid, or, just you doubt yourself, whether it's work or personal or whatever. And so I think we just really wanted to amp that up as much as possible. I think we had re-recorded and Anna rewrote some of the dialogue of the appendage in post to like, even hammer it home even harder in terms of making it more and more relatable. And then we used visual effects to change the mouth movements of the puppet to match the new dialogue.
That is so cool. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, because because I first, when I had first watched the film, I thought that maybe all of it was special effects. But then when I talked to Anna, I realized that, you guys had something that was actually tangible for the film that you had made.
Cool. It was all real. Even the mouth movement was still real mouth movement. We just sort of changed the timing of it, but it's all real. I don't think there's any CGI in the film, which is cool. The short film had like a version has like a little bit of CGI, but the feature does not.
Was there a sequence in the film that you found was particularly challenging to edit, or maybe one that just wasn't falling into place right away?
Definitely. The first scene in the movie, the cold open, was definitely the most challenging, I would say. Initially, the dialogue between Hannah and her mom was a lot more like nuanced, I would say. And I think when we cut it together, we realized people were like, we realized that the mom wasn't as harsh, or maybe her harshness wasn't reading on screen like it did on paper. And so we, despite amazing performances from Deborah Bernard and Hadley Robinson, and so we spent the most of, I feel like the scene that it was the first scene that we cut, and or one of the first scenes that was cut, and it was probably the final scene that we locked. It was just a lot of back and forth in terms of, changing some dialogue with ADR to amp up, the what the mom is saying, and also just when we're cutting to Hannah, when we're cutting to the mom, and just really playing around with that. We even, to amplify Hannah's drinking problem, in like the first minute of the movie, she takes like a really big gulp from a wine glass, and we, like, using visual effects, increase the amount of wine in the glass that she swallows to make it feel a little bit more like she has a problem. And so, like, amping up things like that, I think just kind of it all just increased the dramatic tension in the right way.
Well, from, I mean, the storytelling to the editing, the acting, what is it that you feel really differentiates Appendage from horror movies that have come out in more recent years?
I would say Appendage is just, it's not afraid to have fun, and it's sort of a really cool blend, I feel, of like art house horror, B horror, and commercial horror. Maybe less so on the commercial horror, but I do think that it really blends a lot of different genres. But I think that film is like super campy, and Appendage is kind of riding this interesting line between, okay, we're going to be a little campy. Okay, now we're going to be really serious. Okay, now it's not funny at all anymore. And then, oh, now it's funny again. And so I haven't really seen a film, especially a horror film, blend and jump tones and genres quite like this one before.
Well, lastly, I'd love to know, like, what kind of projects you're hoping to do next. Do you want to do more editing, producing, stay in the horror genre?
I'd love to keep doing everything. I think probably editing right now. And I love writer directors. That's kind of my jam. And so I just want to work with more writer directors and directors that are really focused on having a vision. And love to do horror. I would love to do comedy. I'd love to do drama. I'd love to do it all.
Well, that was all that I had for you. But thank you so much for chatting with me, Alex. Again, I love this movie. I think it's one of my favorite horrors of the year. I'm a big horror buff, so I watch
Awesome. Cool.
a lot of horror films, and I love this one.
Cool. Thank you, Rachel. That's awesome.